When it comes to mission readiness, our military branches are struggling with recruitment and morale is plunging. For a unique roundtable discussion, we're putting the military in focus.
After decades fighting terrorists in the Middle East, the U.S. is now facing a more complicated military landscape. There's potential for war with China over Taiwan, while an increasingly hostile Russia and Iran open the possibility of war on several fronts. Russian President Vladimir Putin threatens nuclear war if NATO troops enter Ukraine, while Iran's proxy forces attack U.S. troops nearly every day in the Middle East, recently killing 3 U.S. service members in Jordan. Congress debates additional funding for Ukraine and Israel, while U.S. readiness for the next war is in question.
We want to be able to do everything we want in the Middle East, in Europe, and in Asia, all at the same time. I don't think that that can last forever.
A main priority is countering China. The U.S. Navy plans to expand its fleet to 355 ships, which is still smaller than China's current Navy. According to leaked U.S. intelligence, China's shipbuilding capacity is 232 times greater than the U.S. China stores military assets on artificial islands in the South China Sea, ahead of President Xi Jinping's 2027 deadline for a possible Taiwan invasion. China and Russia also have hypersonic missiles. Russia used them in Ukraine. The U.S. is working with Japan to build an air defense system that can stop hypersonic weapons. Without it, NATO countries and even the most advanced U.S. warships could be defenseless. The U.S. also faces a personnel problem. Recruiting issues force the Army to restructure and cut its force by 24,000.
We are competing in one of the toughest recruiting landscapes I've seen in over 33 years of service. This recruiting crisis certainly did not appear overnight and cannot be repaired overnight.
That crisis forced the Navy to drop its high school graduation requirement. And you see right here, last fiscal year, of the 4 main branches, only the Marines hit their recruiting goal. You see the Army about 15,000 short. All this while Iran increases its uranium stockpile. Right now, it's enriching uranium to 60%, a short step away from weapons grade 90%. Now, the U.S., of course, is a main nuclear power. We still have a strong conventional deterrent, but our enemies are getting stronger. And without a clear direction, our ability to manage the most important developments all across the globe is in question. Harris?
Nate, boy, great reporting as always. We appreciate that.
Thank you.
Again, on our expert military panel, retired Lieutenant Colonel Danny Davis, a senior fellow at Defense Priorities, Iowa Senator Joni Ernst, member of the Senate Armed Services Committee and Army combat veteran. Joey Jones is here, retired Marine bomb tech and Fox News contributor, along with KT McFarland, former national security advisor under President Donald Trump. Well, I tell you, it doesn't matter where we start, but I do want to start today with China. That number, when we got to 232 times greater capacity to build ships China's Navy has than our U.S. Navy, you had a reaction.
I did, because it's like that. It's like they think they're going to need them or something. They're putting a lot of effort ahead of time into that. And look, the issue for the United States is not just that we don't have enough ships. We don't have enough manpower to man the ships. Even if we got the capacity, we don't have enough manpower to man them. And that's maybe a bigger issue.
Yeah, and, you know, everybody just kind of jump in here. Joey Jones, the only branch that met its recruiting requirements were the Marines.
Yeah, the Marine Corps, in 2023, the Marine Corps met it by 21 bodies, so good for them. I could talk about why I think that is. When I joined the military, the Army promised me a college degree. The Air Force promised me an occupation after service. The Navy promised me travel. The Marine Corps said, we don't think you have what it takes, but you can try. And I think that's the difference. I have a quote here from the acting commandant speaking to Congress, to the Senate, saying, your Marine Corps exists to fight and win our nation's battles, the same fierce competitive spirit to win no matter the challenge. That is the mentality that will bring men and women to the military. They need to feel challenged. If you're bringing the bar down to them, what's the difference in going to college or the military? Why not feed into the American spirit rather than just believe it's gone? And on the China stuff, I have more to say there, but I'll leave
No.
it.
But, and actually, I want to jump on that because when I joined the Army back in 1985 as a private, I mean, yeah, they offered some things like the college fund or whatever. That was nice, but I wanted to be able to step up and to be able to do the right thing. And they were hard on us back then. It's not the case today, and I think that's why fewer people are joining.
Yeah, if I can share as well, I think we all join for different reasons. But if you look at why recruiting is failing abysmally right now, is because we have an administration that, instead of focusing on the things that Joey just mentioned, the lethality and making sure that we have the mightiest military on the face of the planet, we have an administration that's entirely focused on ideology
woke
and
ideology.
green climate. We need electric vehicles in the military now. I'm sorry, I drove those roads in Iraq, and there were no charging stations to be found.
Well, one thing I'll say is, yes, this administration, if you handed them a hot potato, they let it ruin in their hands. But I talked to Amber Smith, and a lot of you know who she is. She's an Army veteran. She was working in the Trump administration for the DOD as a spokesperson 5 years ago on a podcast. And she said recruitment was the greatest threat to our country, not an enemy, but our ability to keep our military. This is a multi-generational, bipartisan problem. If you ask me, it goes back to a country that's so spoiled that's rested on its laurels. We look at how we focused on counterinsurgency for 20 years and said, the Pacific, they're fine. They can just have a party in Hawaii. Well, now the Marine Corps won't be stood up for its future capabilities till 2030, but they just sold off artillery. They just sold off our tanks to pay for it. So Congress looks at them and says, you need to fix your capability. And the commandant at the time, Berger, goes and says, well, here's how we can pay for it. We're going to sell all this off and get rid of that so we can be ready to fight on islands in the Pacific. It's just going to take us 7 years to get there, and we're going to sell them off today.
You can turn it around very quickly. When I joined the Reagan administration, we were in the same position. We had ships that couldn't sail because they didn't have parts. We had pilots that didn't have enough training hours to fly. For every tank we had that could work, we had one right next to it that we had to use for spare parts. Reagan turned it all around. He had a Reagan defense buildup. He went to the areas that we were behind in military capabilities. He also put that spirit back into the hearts of the American people.
So how did he do that?
First of all, he loves America, right? And he increased their pay. He increased defense spending on all the major areas. He had technology advancements. But then most of all, he made people really proud to wear the uniform. When I went to the Pentagon,
that's the key.
You were not allowed to wear the military uniform in Washington, D.C. because it looked, ooh, it was after Vietnam. It looked, ooh, too tough, too military. So
and I can
at the
tell you,
Pentagon, which is military.
Yeah, so anyway, so everybody...
I came in during that time. I joined
You
in that time.
probably couldn't even fit in your uniform, because what happened was we found all these guys who were wearing their uniforms, none of them fit anymore because they hadn't worn them in years.
But Reagan did. I mean, he inspired people to want to join and to be proud to be an American, to put your life on the line potentially for your country. And nearly everybody I joined up with did the same thing. So there was a lot of pride and a lot of high standards.
Let's get into what China is doing. And CNN was reporting this. Others have reported through communications from the Taiwanese government. So the Kinmen Islands sit closer to China than they do actually to Taiwan as a nation. But Taiwan, those are their outer islands. China has been surrounding those islands, and recently, according to published reports, surrounded and boarded a tourist boat. They searched everybody. It wasn't clear if they would make it off that boat. I mean, imagine being on it. Why is China getting aggressive now? I mean, that is hands-on. Can you imagine being...
They do the same thing with fishing vessels. So what China's doing is they want to show the world, particularly Taiwan, Japan, Korea, the U.S., we have the capability of taking Taiwan anytime we want. That's why they're having these more and more aggressive military exercises, because they don't want to fight. They just want to show you we can do it. And then, when there's a moment of opportunity, then they work out with Taiwan. Well, do you really want to go to war? You can't win a war with us. All of the American wargaming shows we don't win a war with Taiwan unless we go nuclear.
I think I recognize that. It's called actual deterrence.
It's called real deterrence. It used to work. It doesn't work now.
Yes, and I would say China will continue to probe in that area, but they will also continue to impede freedom of navigation through the South China Sea. They will continue to engage and they will see exactly how far they can go before they get an American reaction. They're going to continue on this path. They are going to stay at it.
The most frustrating part of this is nothing about this is new. China's acted this way, provocative, pushing buttons for decades, since before I was on this country or in this world. And so I look back and I think, how could we not solve the Iran problem for 8 presidents? How can we not have an answer for China having literally fought a war in the Pacific and understanding the necessity of it? Now we're trying to catch up. We look at something like supersonic missiles. That is a capability that will be necessary in the future.
Right.
China has them. Russia has them. The U.S. a decade out at best. We look at our Navy. I mean,
Wait. Let's hold on. Why don't we have them?
We can't test them. We didn't put any money in it, okay?
There you
so
go.
the Chinese and the Russians are
prioritize.
hypersonic weapons. It's a big missile gap. What were we doing? We were fighting forever wars in the Middle East, which we didn't need to fight.
Exactly right.
So everybody else caught up with us and passed?
Like I said
they're
earlier,
way ahead of
we were
us.
so focused on counterinsurgency
Right.
operations from boot camp forward through the Pentagon that we weren't focused on these things. And it makes me worry. This is Congress, in my opinion, walking, chewing gum. They like to, I don't see that happen a lot. We didn't do it at the Pentagon either. We didn't fight a war and prepare for a war at the same time. Perhaps they didn't have the money. They've never passed had passed an audit. So I think they have all the money in the world.
Wow.
I think they need to do a better job at where they spend
But
it.
the hypersonic weapons is a really big deal.
It is.
Because we don't have a defense against it.
Right.
We don't have the weapons to deter them. And if a conflict were to
Do
happen...
any of our allies?
Nobody has them. Russia, China...
Only the
We
enemies.
don't have them. Only the bad
Okay,
guys.
that sounds like
A missile gap.
not just a missile gap. It sounds like mission urgency. Like
It
what?
is.
It
in
is.
10 years out.
Really
Even more
is.
so, Harris, we don't have the capability to cripple China by taking their grid out in a moment, but they have that over us.
So we had a great discussion this past week. We had the commander of Strategic Command based out of Offutt Air Force Base in Nebraska in front of our Armed Services Committee this last week. We talked about those capabilities that should exist within our nuclear triad. And it's pretty alarming what you will hear even in open testimony coming from the commander on those areas of shortfall that we have. So here comes the political conundrum where you've got folks on the very far left and some even on the right that don't want to build up our military defenses. And these are defensive weapons to counter nuclear tactics coming from other nations and to provide for our own cover. We are unwilling as a public right now and through representation in Congress to put the money where our mouth is. We absolutely need to do that for the defense of our nation.
If I could say what compounds that for being a problem or for being a solution is that we want to do everything all over the place. We want to stay forever in the Ukraine war. We want to keep our
So
troops
that was my next question, because I want to get to that. Look, when Americans hear, oh, we need more money for the Pentagon, we need more money, but we are actually deployed in several places and now taking incoming, like they ask, well, what was the money for? Now we're getting hit.
Yeah.
Talk to me about Ukraine. And that, again, is where the money issue comes up. What is the bottom line?
No, but it also is where the equipment issue is, because we are drawing down from our own forces to give to Ukraine.
Yeah, right. We
So
have
we're not
given,
replacing it.
according to DOD statistics, over 5,000 military vehicles alone from the United States. And that's on top of the millions of rounds of ammunition that have been going on, the missiles, the air defense interceptors, all of those things
Can we
which we would
continue
need.
that?
No, we can't continue that without seriously degrading our ability to defend ourselves if we get into a sustained
Here's the problem,
war.
if I may step in.
What you said, though, Joey, just real quickly, it would take more than money. It takes time.
Exactly.
So the
It's
consensus
exactly
is
right.
the money they want to send to Ukraine is 1% of our defense spending, and it's presented to us. That's a heck of a deal. 1% of our defense spending is going to go to Ukraine, and it's going to take the Russian threat away from us, and we'll be in a better place. That's a good deal. Well, I can get a good deal on a Volkswagen Beetle, but if I need a truck, that good deal on a Volkswagen Beetle doesn't help me. And you want to know how much.
Who's the truck and who's the VW in that scenario?
And you want to know how much 1% matters? Go to Congress and tell them to increase defense spending by whatever they have baked in NDA plus 1% and see how much arguing happens. So when it's billions of dollars, 1% still matters. I mean, 1% would fix the Marine Corps problem a lot quicker than 8 years, but we can't get that money right now.
So the other thing is the 1% doesn't mean Ukraine wins.
Exactly.
The 1% is just to hold it where it is.
Right.
It is a stalemated war.
So it stays right where it is.
It stays right where it is.
And who does
it's
that
a war of
benefit?
attrition.
Russia?
Totally. It's a war of attrition, and in a war of attrition, who wins? The guy.
What
who
should
wins.
Biden have
do.
done not to get us to
And
this point,
I may be
Senator?
in the lone person on this panel, but
brave for
I
coming,
do
though.
think that we can support Ukraine. I take a nuanced view at this, where a lot of that spending goes to humanitarian support in Ukraine to pay for teacher pensions, their small businesses. I'm okay with sending munitions as long as we can
Well, let me ask you
produce
this,
those
Why are
because
munitions.
we're running
At
short
the
on time,
Iowa
if you can
Army
believe it,
ammunition
because we've
plant.
had a long conversation. But, Senator, bottom line here is not whether or not we support Ukraine. We support people all over the world. Our hearts are with them. The bottom line is, can we win? And win
Exactly.
means help them win.
Right.
Okay, bottom line, Harris, is
We can't win.
Well, we can't with this president, let me tell you, because we need a commander-in-chief that is willing to show the American people how the Ukrainians are going to win. We need a strategy.
There's
I haven't heard anybody
that
say
hasn't
that.
been
Nobody thinks-
communicated.
Let me say
Nobody
this.
thinks you can
As
win
we
this
saw
war.
with President Reagan and as we saw with President Trump, these wars, like what's happening in Ukraine, you win them before they happen. And that's how we
Exactly.
should try to win what's happening in China.
Exactly.
Well,
But
you
you
and
see,
I
look-
talked early on,
That-
Senator. You know, day two of the conflict, of the war, it was then a conflict between Russia and Iran and Ukraine, that we needed to do more at the beginning.
Absolutely.
And we didn't do enough. All right. I hate to do it. We gotta go. I want to say thank you to Military in Focus, our very first roundtable on a discussion like this. Thanks for being here.
you.